Hi, welcome to Tasha's Library. Today's video is going to be a September wrap-up. Now, September for me was a bit of a reading slump and I was pretty busy. So I actually was quite surprised that I still managed to read 6 books. One of these books was sci-fi, the other 5 were fantasy, one was audiobook, one was ebook, and the others were physical copies. The first book I read was for book club, and this was The Two of Swords by KJ Parker. So this is one of his earlier series, I believe. And I was looking forward to this because I had read 16 Ways to Defend a Walled City, and I'd loved that. That trilogy was so humorous and had so much depth to it in terms of its morality, its philosophy, all its themes were amazing. So I was expecting something of the same. And initially, The Two of Swords disappointed me. And I was almost DNFing it. Then I gave it 2 stars. But then I have subsequently thought about it and gone back and changed it to 3 stars because I think it was a lot deeper than I'd actually noticed at the time. So the premise of Two of Swords is this big epic war between East and West. The entire world is at war, and this war has been going on for ages. And it's basically instigated by these 2 brothers, Senza and Forza, who are fighting each other. No one ever really wins. It's pretty much a war of attrition, and everyone's kind of forgotten why they're fighting in the first place. Really interesting premise. Now, the characterization is interesting because each chapter is a different POV, and the POVs kind of hand over to each other. So you might have one POV in one chapter, and then a minor character within that particular chapter then becomes the POV of the next chapter, and so on. And it keeps getting handed over till the end of the book. And this is really interesting, and I really like this as a structure. So it almost reads as a bit of a series of novellas, and fascinating concept. The difficulty with this is that some POVs are more interesting than others, and you get really engaged with one POV, and then you move on and you don't really get to follow their story again. And so that to me was a little bit disappointing. Hopefully the sequels will revisit some of these characters because I found them super interesting, really. My favorite character was Telamon, who's a priestess. She has no compunction about killing people for selfish reasons. If she needs something and she needs to kill to get it, she will do it. And she was a captivating character. I really enjoyed her. I also enjoyed the POV of an archer called Tusa. Very interesting. And the POVs of the generals were quite interesting as well. Others I was less engaged in. And so that made it difficult because once you get to those POVs, you kind of fall into a bit of a slump and you don't really want to continue the story. At least that's how I felt. What I found most difficult about this book is really the prose. It's almost non-fiction in style. It's very dry, laconic. There is an attempt at humor, but it didn't quite sit with me. And I found it very difficult to immerse myself in this style. I felt that the world building wasn't extensive, it wasn't immersive, and this is really where I struggled to engage initially and almost DNF the book. But then I hit some of the interesting POVs and that kept me going. Some of the similes and metaphors I felt were a bit forced, and I feel that perhaps the intent was to make them humorous, but there were things like this. The flowing skirts of the ridiculous red dress hampered and obstructed her like bored, hungry children. Interesting. Another one. The panic was still there. It was always there these days, like a faithful but unfashionable dog. I get the humor in that, but I found them a little bit clunky, and yeah, it kind of pulled me out of the story a little bit as well. So I find that one of the things that this book really had going for it, though, were those themes, particularly of survival in a very difficult circumstance, in a war that's never ending, that you're probably not going to survive. And it's really about that futility of war. And it's interesting because at one point, one of the characters say, why are we fighting this war? And they go for all the reasons. And then they said, well, mostly from force of habit. This is what we've always done. This is what we'll always do. And so this is the way it is. And yeah, so ultimately, I think it is a 3-star read. I'm hoping that the sequels develop some of those characters a little bit more, because I'm really interested to see what happens to them. I also listened to Small Favor, which is book 10 of the Dresden Files by Jim Butcher. I do love these on audio because they are narrated by James Masters, who was Spike on Buffy, and he does an awesome job. He does the characters so well, and to me, he is Harry Dresden. Having said that, I did give it 4 stars, and I have a feeling that maybe it is because I listened to it on audiobook, because even though I do love James Masters, and the Dresden Files are one of the few books I can listen to on audiobook, I do have difficulty listening to books. My mind wanders. I get distracted. I do not have oral attention. And so I actually think I miss aspects of it, which may have led me to potentially not enjoy the book as much as if I'd read it. And I will be reading number 11 as an ebook, just because I feel like I need to immerse myself into the story a little bit more next time. So once again, I can't give you much about this book. It is number 10, so it's spoilers, but the Dresden Files are pretty much focused on this main character, Harry Dresden, who is a wizard in Chicago, and he advertises his services openly, and it has a large array of characters. It has a number of magical characters sort of interwoven into modern day Chicago. So you have demons and monsters and the Fae and vampires, and it's such a deep story. It is super interesting. The first few books have a little bit more levity to them, but by book 10, you're really getting into the darker aspects. There are higher stakes. Harry Dresden's become a far more fleshed out character, and because he can come across as a little bit flippant in the first few books, but he does develop, and he's so lovable despite his numerous flaws, including quite an outdated view on women. But that's just his character, and it is who he is. And I love it. I really do. And I can say that as a feminist, I still enjoy Harry Dresden. So book 10 just had so many twists, so many gut-wrenching moments. I actually felt like I could have cried in one of the bits. I won't tell you what it is. If you've read it, you know which bits. It is, heart-wrenching. It really, really is. And it just still got great humor and engaging writing style. The plot development is incredible. The story just keeps developing and new things happen and all the old characters come back. And yeah, it's just beautiful. I love the Dresden Files. They're my palate cleanser. They're my comfort reads. And this was a really enjoyable good time. I also read a short novella by Brandon Sanderson, The Secret History, and I can't say much about this one because the whole premise of the book is a spoiler, but it does provide a different perspective on Mistborn Era 1 from one of the characters' point of views. I will not tell you who, because once again, that's a spoiler. And this was interesting because I went into it thinking I was going to love it because I loved Mistborn so much. And I love the epicness of it. I love the world building. I just love the characters. And you get a little bit of that in this, but this is more of an interlude. And so it's a little less epic. And because of that, I actually found it a little less engaging. The narrative is a little bit more fragmented because it's providing some insights into various events across the 3 novels. And so I was a little bit disappointed, but I think that's possibly because I went in with such enormous expectations. And of course, it is a novella. It is a little bit different. And so it was still a really good time. And to be honest, I would love the same treatment for Mistborn Era 2, because it'd be really interesting to see this particular perspective on those events. And so ultimately, I gave this a 3-star, highly recommend it. It does add to the story. It gives you a little bit of a deeper understanding of what happened. Now, my best reads of September were the first 2 novels of the Winnowing Flame trilogy by Jen Williams. So the first one is The Ninth Reign, and the second one is The Bitter Twins. And oh my God, was this amazing. This was a 5-star, top tier, probably one of my favorite series ever. It is incredible. And it's quite rare for me to go directly from book 1 to book 2. When I'm reading a series, I usually like to break it up. So that's, I don't know, I need a little palate cleanser. This one, I had to know what was going to happen next. And the only reason I haven't read the 3rd book straight away is because I really needed to get onto some other books that I hadn't finished. So the premise of this particular series is you have the city called Ibora, occupied by these almost godlike creatures. I kind of view them as a little bit elfish in a sense. They don't age, they virtually immortal. They live in this kind of utopian world maintained by a tree god, and they maintain their immortality by drinking the sap from this tree. However, when the tree god dies, they go into decline. And however, they also find out that if they drink human blood, they can also maintain their immortality to some extent. But this comes at a price. And the price is a disease that starts wiping out the entire society. And so we come into this story with Ibora in significant decline, and it's super fascinating. So the plot, the world building are amazing in this. It's really a unique blend of fantasy and science fiction with horror elements. It is constantly surprising. It's a highly atmospheric world, highly immersive. Jen Williams has just created the most unique world that is just incredible to sit in. And you don't want to leave it, and you want to find out more. And the characterization is amazing as well. We mainly follow 3 characters, although there are a few other characters that come in at times. One of them is Vintage, who's a noblewoman who studies relics in the world. And then we have Tor, her companion, who is an Iboran, who is highly flawed and is obviously looking for a way to escape this particular fates of this disease. And then we have Noon, who's a fell witch, who joins this duo. And so they become this kind of found family. And it's really cool because they captivating characters. They are deep characters with significant flaws, but you love them nonetheless. And the story is just really about, loyalty and morality and survival. And things happen that you just cannot expect. It's highly unpredictable. It keeps you on the edge of your seats. There's great diversity in its romantic relationships as well. And there is that little bit of romance, But what I like about it is that romance is not the dominating feature, because I'm not a fan of romance in my books. Yet I still love this. I enjoyed these romances. So that says a lot. It also has great action scenes. The creatures in it are so inventive. There's species that have been created by Jen Williams. There's a quest. There's an underlying mystery that needs to be solved. And yes, I cannot recommend these books enough, and I cannot wait for the third book. And so this is an easy 5-star read for me. Final book I read this past month was a sci-fi by Philip K. Dick called Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? This was a 3-star for me. It is the book that Blade Runner, the film, is based on, although it is quite different. So don't expect the story to be exactly the same. And I think I enjoyed the film more, and that is incredibly rare for me. But I think that's just because I don't know if I'm a great fan of those classic sci-fis. I just don't know if I am. And I keep trying them, and I keep enjoying them, but they're not top tier for me. And so, but anyway, the premise is, of course, this dystopian future, post-apocalyptic world where there's been mass extinction, some sort of radioactive fallout. Animals are incredibly rare, and so most people have only ever seen electric animals. And you also have androids who have become so advanced that they are virtually indistinguishable from human beings. And pretty much the only way they can be distinguished is through an empathy test. And that is, of course, similar to the movie. And the problem with these androids, of course, is that some of them go rogue, and they are then having to be hunted by bounty hunters. And so we follow this bounty hunter called Deckard, who is tasked with hunting down 6 androids who have attacked another bounty hunter. Now, Deckard's an interesting character, and there are some really interesting characters in this novel. However, I found the characterization to be quite shallow, and I think this is quite common with classic sci-fis like Foundation, for example, where the characters aren't really the focus of the book. However, I would have liked to have engaged with these characters a little bit more, and I didn't connect with them. I didn't really care what was going to happen to them. I found the dialogue quite unrealistic, which made immersing myself into this world quite difficult as well. But having thought about it subsequently, I actually think maybe some of that was deliberate, and particularly because it does look at those key themes of what makes us human, you know, where do we draw the line? And if we consider empathy to be the dividing line between humans and androids, then we have to be worried about that, because some humans clearly don't have empathy. And in fact, in the novel, some of the human beings in this actually do severely lack empathy. And so it kind of makes us think, well, maybe the androids are actually more human than the humans. And I think this kind of targets that fear that human beings potentially have, that this is what makes us unique as a species. We are unique as a species, or we like to perceive ourselves as unique as a species. And if we take that away, then who are we? What are we? And I think this is where this novel really shines, is its exploration of ideas. And I think that's what's great about classic sci-fi in the first place. It's really an exploration of those really fundamental themes of humanity. And in a way that sci-fi alone can do. I only gave it a 3-star because I didn't love the reading experience, because I didn't immerse myself enough, but the ideas lingered. And for that, I actually think, yeah, it is highly recommended, even though I did enjoy the film a little bit more, and that's rare for me. So they were my 6 books for September, my slowest reading month by far. However, I'm hoping that October is a change to that. We shall see. See you soon. Thanks for watching.